Hi, Chris Montalbano with Pilgrim Title, bringing you another installment of Todd Talks Title, and we're here with Jim Sapiga, President and CEO of Connecticut Attorneys Title Insurance
Morning,
Company.
Chris.
Morning. So one of the new, it's not, I wouldn't call it a wave just yet, but you can see it sort of swelling up, is the use of remote online notarizations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Remote online notarizations are basically the ability to take an acknowledgement of a borrower in a mortgage situation or the execution of a note situation remotely. So for example, if you are signing, you're in my office right now.
Right.
Normally what we would do in a closing is that I would take your acknowledgement and say, is this your free act and deed? You sign your signature. I, if I'm a notary, can then take the jurat, the acknowledgement, do the stamp, all that stuff. What remote online notarization allows is basically you to be here by yourself. The notary is using a camera in a state, let's say, like Virginia, where remote online notarization legislation has been passed in the last few years, and it allows the notary to be in Virginia and do what we would normally do face-to-face here in our presence, do that remotely. What's interesting, though, is that Virginia allows for remote online notarization, but as far as I know, Rhode Island has not passed any legislation to allow for the validity of that occurring in Rhode Island.
Correct. The reciprocity isn't there. So if the remote online notarization is taken in Virginia, but the property happens to be in Rhode Island, that wouldn't be considered a valid acknowledgement here as of yet.
And in fact, most underwriters, including CADIC, won't insure a mortgage that's done that way. Without enabling legislation from the legislature of Rhode Island or other states where we operate, we won't insure those transactions, because if I was a foreclosure attorney in the next downturn and I knew that my client had their acknowledgement done remotely in a state where there was not enabling legislation, guess what defense I would raise? It goes to that. So I think that's sort of like, what may be the logical sort of like, flow from that.
Correct.
But we're seeing a lot of, and I'm not necessarily saying that Ron is a absolute horrible thing. In certain situations it can be very user friendly, but attorneys, settlement agents can all be notaries, and depending on the situation it really can be beneficial, but it may not be necessary to add another transaction fee to utilize remote online notarization, because most of the notarizations that we do now at closings take place with you.
Correct.
And you could be a notary as much as anybody, especially a remote one.
Correct.
So if you wanted to do closings, you have your office physically in Florida,
right.
But if you had a client or you couldn't be in Florida, you could utilize the remote online notarization system, if you will, with you being the notary for your clients in Florida. So there's some pros and cons there. But we're going to continue to watch legislation.
How many states have passed
I believe it's about, oh boy, that's a good question. I think it's about 8. I think there's a lot pending. And if you look at the map or chart that we have, we've color coded where RON is now legal in certain states, where legislative is currently pending, and also where it's not. So you can see that there are some states that have passed this legislation. I think the closest that we have currently is Virginia.
Correct.
And I could be wrong on that, but you'll see from the map that where it is. But it's something to pay attention to.
Sure. Yeah, sure. It's building. It's out there, and
it is.
With anything where technology can make some things more efficient and more user friendly, it'll eventually find its way home. But as of right now, I think there's still a lot of gaps in the system.
There is, and it is a threat a little bit as well, and that's why we're watching it. And we're by independent agents for independent agents, and we're working hard to keep you in the game. So we're making sure that any legislation that gets passed is agent-friendly legislation. So that's our what we want to do and what we're pushing for.
Well, as an independent agent, I appreciate that, and thank you all for watching another Todd Talks title with Jim Sapiga.
Thanks, Chris.
Chris Montalbano.